catastrophic flash floods in Spain have killed dozens and devastated towns. Meteorologists branded it one of the most intense storms of its type in the last century for the Valencia region.
We all know about climate change, but do we know how it is caused? The main problem of climate change is the excessive human emissions of greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide, water vapor, or methane. These gases are necessary for our planet. For example, plants need carbon dioxide, CO2, to live. However, the extreme accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere traps the energy that is supposed to go back into space and turns it into heat, making the temperature of our planet increasingly higher. And what happens if our planet keeps getting hotter? Well, the consequences that we hear about in the news every day. Ocean waters becoming warmer and more acidic, polar ice melting, sea levels rising, and weather changing in extreme ways.
Around me, look at that. That car has been thrown because of the power of the floods that gush through here down the street into a lamppost. Imagine the ferocity of that, and explains everything else that you're seeing. A town that is covered in thick, clinging mud. You can smell it as you walk around.
Like Armstrong et al. Described in their book Communicating Climate Change, a guide for the educators, by 2100, scientists are predicting an increase of 0.3 to 1.2 meters over the 2014 global average level, with potential for a rise of 2.4 meters or more if greenhouse gas emissions continue increasing. This sea level rise is not distributed evenly around the world. For example, because of ocean currents, land subsidence, and other factors, the rate of sea levels rise for the east coast of the United States is about 50% higher than the global average. So how do we produce these gases? According to the United States Environmental Protection Agency, the total emission of greenhouse gases in 2022 was 6,343.2 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent, and the main sources were transportation with 28%, electric power with 25%, industry with 23%, residential and commercial with a 13%, and agriculture with 10%. Good news is that we as individuals and communities can change these numbers by tackling each one of the mentioned sources and reducing the emissions. For example, taking public transportation, cycling or biking instead of taking the car, taking flights only when necessary, reducing our waste, buying food in local shops and clothes in thrift shops, using renewable energy sources and smart meters at home, or even planting trees and plants, since they absorb carbon dioxide.
We all have heard of these climate change preventions. However, as media creators, there are many things we can do to help climate change, both in the way we make our films and in their content. When thinking about sustainability and film as well as TV, there are multiple ways how the film industry can contribute to being more sustainable. Before going into detail, we want to discuss another aspect of the connection between sustainability and film, namely how film contributes to a certain narrative or even ideology through representing different lifestyles. We have gathered a few examples of characters that are sustainable or not and promote certain ways of living. In addition, we have tried to look at their carbon footprints. First of all, we have one of the most iconic characters in film, James Bond. Daniel Craig's James Bond is the least sustainable out of all the James Bonds that are out there. Vehicle leasing company Vanarama has analysed how many miles the different James Bonds have travelled, trees needed to offset the damage and their CO2 emissions. Before No Time to Die, quote, he averages 21,840 pounds of travel-related CO2 emissions for every mission. This way, Bond promotes a non-eco-friendly way of living. His carbon footprint would be equal to 45.2 tons. If we compare his lifestyle to, let's say, Marshall from How I Met Your Mother, things are fairly different in his case. Marshall wants to become an environmental lawyer. While it takes him a good while to get there, he finally reaches his dream job and becomes hired by Honeywell and Coots, where he described as one of the biggest environmental law firms in America. This promotes a very different way of looking at life and obviously caring about the environment. Nevertheless, Marshall's carbon footprint is still over target with approximately 11.8 tons. A different example is Emily from Emily in Paris. As the Green Stories project states on their website, they want to encourage the film industry to stop promoting and glorifying high carbon consumption and thus sustainability. They compare the issue to showcasing casual racism or sexism in sitcoms in the 70s and how we would absolutely jerk at the sight of that. Nevertheless, jerking at the sight of characters who glorify not being sustainable is not a thing yet. Emily, the protagonist of Emily in Paris, excessively promotes fast fashion. She always wears the newest fashion trends in Paris, shops till she drops. Furthermore, she lives a jet-set lifestyle between the US, France and, as of the latest season, Italy. Her carbon footprint is almost as high as Bond's, with about 37.3 tons. With looking at Eric from Sex Education next, we clearly see the difference in promoting a sustainable lifestyle with someone who does consider the effect his way of living has on the environment. Compared to Emily, Eric wears vintage clothing, which promotes the complete opposite of what such a protagonist as Emily Cooper stands for. Moreover, we see Eric commuting to school by bicycle instead of hopping on planes all the time. His carbon footprint is below the UK average and only scores 5.8 tons. One last example, which we found particularly interesting because it is two characters from the same TV show, is Homer versus Lisa from The Simpsons. While Homer eats burgers all the time and illegally dumps waste, Lisa is vegetarian and recycles cans. Homer's carbon footprint is, with 13.6 tons, definitely over the average, compared to Lisa's, which is at only 8 tons under the UK average. As all these examples show, when it comes to television as well as films, there is much room for improvement in creating characters that do not promote lifestyles which go against our environment.
Okay, so now we know how to portray sustainable characters in our films. But that won't be of much help if our production is going to emit 391 metric tons of CO2 or up to 3,370 metric tons in larger productions. In other words, the power used in making Oppenheimer or Barbie is the equivalent of powering 656 homes for a year. A bit too much, right? This is why multiple organizations started to form across Ireland and the world with the mission of leaving the minimum environmental impact possible when making a film. This is a term called green filmmaking or green production, and one of those organizations is called the Albert Project by BAFTA.
So my name's Aaron. I work for Albert, which is a project based at BAFTA, and it's about a collaborative industry project to address the environmental impacts of the TV and broadcasting sectors in the UK. So Albert started at the BBC in around 2009, 2010. The chief creative director of the BBC at the time just said that all BBC productions have to measure their carbon footprint. That's just the way it is. But the BBC realised that they needed to have a common industry approach, so they needed to roll it out to the rest of the industry. So that's when they approached BAFTA to ask them to chair this project really and be an independent advisor to it. People tend to think of sustainability and climate change as a very external issue, and the reality is that the planet will be different if we continue our current trajectory, but it will go on. When you ask people about sustainability, they'll talk about plastic bottles. That is not the fundamental problem that we're addressing here, and the key things are diet, our transport and power. So they're the key things that any of us who address sustainability, whether it's in TV production, film production, or even our own lives, that we need to think about. So we need to think about vehicle choice, we need to think about reducing our meat in our diet, and lastly we need to think about where we get our energy from. Is it from in our homes? Is it from fossil fuel energy, or is it from renewable power?
In Ireland, the agency Screen Ireland has the strongest sustainability plan for TV and film, since they are aware of the climate change problems and of the impact of the audiovisual industry in society. The issues where they mainly focus are reducing carbon impact of production activities, using energy, water and materials efficiently, and purchasing sustainable goods and services. We can talk about sustainability in film without mentioning Emily O'Brien. She founded Earth Angel NYC, an organization that provides the figure of the eco-manager to film crews of New York, whose job is to make sure the production is sustainable in its capacity and offer a responsible use of the resources in all three stages of pre-production, production, and post-production. Organizing shooting locations to be close to each other, encouraging the use of second-hand props or costumes, and even reducing the paperwork in the offices are a few of the tasks eco-managers do.
Shortly after graduating, I realized that the actual process of producing this content is extremely wasteful. We construct all of these big film sets and then we tear them down and throw them into a dumpster. We run diesel generators all day to power these sets. We feed hundreds and hundreds of people, and so much of that food gets thrown out every day.
Emily made history in 2013 with the production of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, making it Sony's most eco-friendly blockbuster to date, when she saved the use of 193,000 plastic bottles, donated 5,861 meals of leftover food to local shelters, and overall diverted a total of 755 tons of waste, saving more than $400,000 in costs. Another example is the animated movie The Peasants, where the team used cardboard instead of wood to create the sets. Since it is a more sustainable option because it requires less materials to create, is lighter and easier to recycle. It's all about the seemingly small choices that can make a bigger impact while making a film. According to the Time magazine, a 1-hour scripted drama episode emits 41 metric tons of CO2 when filmed in LA, versus 68 metric tons in New York, and 136 metric tons in Atlanta. So even something as simple as the location where our story takes place could be essential for the environment. All these choices have paved the way, but unfortunately, recycling bottles and reusing materials is not enough to decrease the huge carbon footprint of film production. That's why the labor of organizations like Screen Ireland or Albert are key to continue moving forward, with plans of exclusively using renewable energy sources and developing clean mobile power solutions to replace diesel generators.
Film is one of the, if not the most powerful medium in the world. And as we all know, with great power also comes great responsibility. When it comes to sustainability, there are many ways in which the film industry can contribute to a change for the better. One way is through the content of a film. If the plot promotes unsustainable ways of living, viewers might get a certain idea of what is right or wrong or aspirable. For example, when watching Emily in Paris, viewers might get the idea that Emily's lifestyle is something they would like to achieve themselves because it is portrayed as something cool and hip. On the other hand, when watching, for example, Sex Education, viewers might get a different idea when looking at Eric's lifestyle. A second way of contributing to sustainability is through being mindful when it comes to the production of the film. Are cans recycled? Could the catering be vegan? Can costumes, props, etc. be reused? The next time you watch a film or a TV show, maybe have a closer look at what kind of lifestyles are promoted. And the next time you make, for example, a short film or a part of a film production, think about the importance of being mindful and the impact we all have on the planet and our future. Remember this essay and let's focus on making our screens greener.